Hi, this is Brian Dolan with the law firm Pepper Hamilton. Each month, Pepper partner Greg Nowak hosts a webinar for West LegalEdcenter, which focuses on issues that are affecting private funds and their managers. You can download a copy of the PowerPoint slides that the presenters went through by visiting Pepper's Insight Center at www.pepperlaw.com, where this podcast is posted. Thank you.
Welcome to the second part of our four-part series this fall, where we're focusing on the life cycle of an investment management firm. The first session in September 25th of this year was focused on choosing the right structure for your advisory firm and your fund. The next session, which will be in November, will be on an SEC, FINRA, and Department of Justice enforcement update. And the last session in December will be exit strategies for fund managers, so please tune into all of those. Today's session, we're going to focus on the meat of operations of an investment advisory firm, and in particular, some recent trends that we've seen in outsourcing of trading, the chief investment officer function, compliance, CFO, HR, and other services. And there's obviously a myriad reasons why firms do that. And speaking as a lawyer, which of course we were the first outsourced consultants, since people realized that it was cheaper to hire lawyers outside than inside. And then of course that goes back and forth in cycles. But as the first outsourced consultants, the primary reason why people have lawyers on the outside is we have an opportunity to see issues from multiple points of view with multiple clients with real money at stake. And as a result, that gives us an opportunity to have more experience, not necessarily on a given client's dime. And so when you consider the benefits of outsourcing, namely a broader experience base, lower sunk costs, everything is variable costs as opposed to a fixed fee, you can understand why firms outsource legal services. Now, the trend that we've seen in the investment management and broker-dealer workspaces, of course, is that outsourcing has become common with respect to niche practices and services, including investment management, including trading, including HR and other type services. So today I'm joined by three colleagues. First, my associate, Ausra Ragauskaite, who's going to help us with some of the legal issues that are associated. And then we're going to have two specialists speak about their particular niches and the benefits of outsourcing in what they do. We have Dave Dalzell from Dalzell Trading, who'll speak about outsourced trading and also, to some extent, outsourced investment management. And Tim Frazier, who's going to talk about outsourcing HR functions and other services with respect to the back office. So before we get too deep into this, Ausra, tell us what is outsourcing from the point of view of the regulator. What rules do we need to worry about if you're an investment advisor? What rules do we need to worry about if we're a broker-dealer?
So various regulatory institutions have addressed this in the past, and the acts that are covering this are, well, first of all, Investment Advisors Act of 1940 has noted that an investment advisor is generally prohibited from paying a cash fee to a third party called a solicitor unless certain conditions are met, and that some of those conditions are that the solicitor has to deliver to the client a statement describing the nature of the relationship between the investment advisor and the solicitor, and the compensation that the solicitor will receive.
So what we're talking about, and if you listen to the first program in September, there's a distinction between a product and a service. So if we're talking about the sale of a product, namely a security and interest in a fund, there is the issuer's exemption for the issuer's personnel to sell those products. But if you go to a third party, that person needs to be a licensed broker-dealer. So when you go to an agency relationship where that person is now providing services, a certain licensure is required. What Ausra is talking about here is where the investment advisor is selling a service, namely its advisory services, and it's trying to find new clients. And that's the solicitor's rule for outsourcing the solicitor's function. What about custody?
So custody, there you are required to maintain client funds with qualified custodian. So in a way, it's not a choice. This is what you have to do. And qualified custodians can be banks, registered broker-dealers, futures, commission merchants, or certain foreign entities.
So again, if you're a registered investment advisor, it's considered a fraudulent practice, self-custody, unless you have very specific exceptions available. And normally you must use a qualified custodian. Qualified custodians are banks, brokerage firms, and trust companies with trust powers. In the context of uncertificated assets like crypto or digital assets, where it's very difficult to figure out how do you custody those, the industry is still somewhat in an uproar over understanding how to custody digital assets. And probably the most promising avenue are those exchanges that have become registered as broker-dealers with custody powers, and that way they can hold the coins and hot wallets for the investment advisor, again, an outsourced function. Or in the alternative, using the SEC's FAQs on custody, in particular uncertificated assets where you have a nominee embedded in the contract. So if you have a smart contract with two key verification, with one key held by a qualified custodian, you've effectively denied custody or control of the asset to the manager, and that's what custody is all about. From a policy point of view, we want to make sure that the manager can't put the assets in his own pocket and run away with them, fraud and defalcation. So ultimately the custody rule is talking about safekeeping client assets and funds. So whenever you're outside of the four corners of the advisor, and in certain cases it's mandated to have that outsourced service, you need to make sure that whoever it is that's providing that service has proper licenses and meets the accounting requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Shifting gears for a second, if you're following along, we're on slide 5. FINRA, the Financial Institution Regulatory Authority dealing with registered broker-dealers, also has a series of rules that are outstanding governing outsourcing of services. What about those rules, Ausra?
Yes, so FINRA, back in the day, and SAD, they came out with a notice as early as 2005 saying that the main message was that outsourcing an activity or function to a third-party service provider does not relieve members of their ultimate responsibility for compliance with applicable laws and regulations. And they also said that, in general, persons conducting activities or functions that require registration with FINRA are considered associated persons of the member.
So let's unpack that a little bit. Basically, at the time, in 2005, NASD was saying that you can outsource, but you're still responsible.
Right.
And that simply outsourcing doesn't relieve you of the responsibility to make sure that the outsourcing is done and the service is properly provided. But it also was saying that any persons conducting the activities or functions that require registration are considered associated persons of the member, which means they have to have registration. So one of the most common outsourced functions is the use of a third-party financial and operations principal for a small broker-dealer. And that person must have a license, and that person must have a Series 24 license or, an options or other trading principles license. And that license then means that person is an associated principal of the member of the broker-dealer. Now, if the outsourced FINOP has multiple clients, then that person may have multiple associations as a financial and operations principal, which is perfectly fine as long as it's been disclosed to the SEC. There have been several other notices issued by FINRA over the years that have attempted to define and clarify the scope of the supervisory responsibilities and obligations that must be discharged by the FINRA member with respect to outsourced activities. With the advent of the Chief Compliance Rule, there were new attempts at outsourcing. In particular, could a registered advisor or broker-dealer outsource the chief compliance function, or could a registered mutual fund, for example, have a third-party firm act as an outsourced chief compliance officer? And the answer is yes. But tell us about the parameters of that, Ausra.
Yes. So in 2015, Office of Compliance Inspections and Examinations carried out a series of examinations. They examined 20 SEC registered investment advisors that have outsourced their chief compliance officer functions to unaffiliated third parties. And they came out with their observations and notes. And primarily what they've commented on is that the chief compliance officer, the outsourced entity, has to have good communication lines going with the investment advisor. It has to be strong, frequent personal interaction. They contrasted it to impersonal interactions or just electronic communications or predefined checklists. And the goal of that is to have a very clear understanding of the registrant's business operations and risks related to that. And then they also commented that the outsourced chief compliance officers have to have sufficient resources to serve in their roles. And they also have to have empowerment from the registrants to carry out their functions and perform annual reviews and other outsourced activities. And they also observed the main deficiencies and said that oftentimes they noted that chief compliance officers could not articulate the business lines or compliance risks of the registrants, and sometimes they used standardized checklists to gather information, and the checklist didn't really sufficiently disclose what the risks are. And
let me stop you there for a second, interrupt. That's a really important point, and that is, while the economic decision to outsource chief compliance function is relatively straightforward, what would it cost me in FTE costs and benefits to have one of those persons internally, including the opportunity costs of having that person potentially miss things because they're only in my business, versus the cost of having an outsourced resource on both a per unit and an annual basis. And then, of course, the opportunity cost of having the outside person not being inside and not knowing what's going on. So, obviously, the outsourced person, no matter how much access they have, they're still looking through a keyhole. And what they see and what they don't see is very important. And so what the SEC is essentially saying is that keyhole can't be a keyhole. It actually has to be a much bigger avenue for observation. And because of the requirement to have personal interaction, they really want those compliance officers to be on site and to see what's going on. Now, one of the big debates in the industry is, do you include your chief compliance officer in certain product development decisions, in certain business decisions as the business continues, or is that chief compliance officer essentially now the human wiretap version, or the human version of a wiretap for the regulator? And that is a tension that has not yet been resolved, and those who are professional compliance officers understand that they walk a very fine line, because if they're viewed as the proverbial tattletale, they never get any information, and they're excluded from the key decisions and understandings. If, on the other hand, they are involved, it's very difficult for them to be able to, they think, act in their compliance function. I have found, as outside counsel, and again as an advisor, not as a compliance officer, that oftentimes being involved in the process early on and being an advocate both for the principle, this is what's right, this is how far you can go, this is good, helps drive the discussion in a way so that an organization doesn't spend resources trying to pursue an opportunity that it can't do legally or within the four corners of compliance. So understanding the process and being an internal advocate is very important. But I remember in law school, one of my ethics professors saying, be careful what you wish for. If you become that internal counsel or compliance person or the external trusted advisor, you still have to be willing and capable of saying no. And ultimately that's the test of whether or not it's a good compliance officer or a good general counsel or outside counsel. Will they say to the CEO or to the charismatic salesperson or to the big revenue generator, no, you can't do it that way, but we can do it this way. And ultimately, that is what the SEC is striving for. Very hard to legislate that, and ultimately every organization has to have its own dynamic grow up. That's where they come up with the concept of tone at the top, right? If you have either internal or external compliance, but the CEO always gets his or her way, and the compliance people are always trying to back and fill, that may not be the right tone at the top. But if the CEO says, wait a minute, that sounds like a great idea, but have you talked to John in compliance or Sally in compliance, and what do they say? Can we do that? That might be evidence of the tone that the SEC is looking for, where, again, we are dealing with other people's money, and that's the key measure here. Are we doing the right thing with respect to our clients? Further, were there other findings from the SEC?
They just, again and again, stress the importance of, being on the ground and knowing the information. They said that, they noted that sometimes the questionnaires provided by the registrants, they included incorrect or inconsistent information, and the outsourced TCOs did not appear to be sufficiently knowledgeable to identify the issues or to follow up properly on them.
Yeah, one of the most devastating things is if the compliance manual that the chief compliance officer uses is still in its shrink-wrapped package when the SEC arrives. It shows that no one, including the outsourced compliance officer, is looking at it. The best practices, of course, is that compliance manual should be tailored to the needs of a particular business and the risks that are identified in that business, which means that somebody actually has to do an honest assessment of what the business is, how it works, and where the risks are. Let's talk for a moment about cybersecurity. Now, there have been, if you watch Power Lunch or any of the other television talking head programs in the financial services industry, there's at least once a week somebody who comes up and says cybersecurity is a huge risk, and whatever your budget is, double it, triple it, quadruple it, because you're going to spend more on cybersecurity than you could ever imagine. And recently, the former director of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, said that there are only two types of people out there: those who know they've been hacked and those who don't. Implying, of course, that everyone has been hacked in one way or another. So, but cybersecurity is expensive, and it's also highly specialized. It's the type of thing that it would be extraordinarily expensive for firms to hire the caliber of cybersecurity experts that are needed. And so this is one of those functions that tends to be outsourced simply because of the scarcity. So what do we need to worry about there, Ausra?
So again, the Office of Compliance Inspections and Examinations released their observations in 2015, and they talked about the issues that the firms are facing with respect to cybersecurity. And what they noted is, that firms have to have good vendor management because some of the largest data breaches in the last few years may have resulted from hacking of third-party vendor platforms. And the firms have to assess how vendor relationships are, how are they selected and monitored, and what the contract terms are?
But the SEC stopped short of saying that if we outsource our cybersecurity function, we don't have to go and find someone to outsource the verification function of our outsourced cybersecurity firm, right? I mean, we can rely on the contract and the policies and procedures that the cybersecurity firm has. But you can see that with the constant evolution of the hacker capability, cybersecurity and understanding what is new and cutting edge is just going to get more and more involved and expensive, and firms need to start thinking about a holistic approach to cybersecurity, including perhaps doing an audit of their cybersecurity specialists to make sure that they are using best practices and complying and doing whatever is necessary to defend the firm. So our last sort of outsourced topic from the legal perspective is the outsourced chief investment officer. And here, the primary reasons for outsourcing is you want to gain access to special expertise, achieve better investment returns, reduce costs, reduce regulatory and fiduciary risks. Now, of course, we're talking here about pension plans or perhaps family offices or foundations engaging an outsourced chief investment officer who is not necessarily an employee of the firm, or probably not an employee of the firm. That kind of sounds like a sub-advisor. I'm going to ask our other guest, Dave Dalzell, to talk to us a few minutes. I know you're here to talk about outsourced trading, but just give us a few insights with respect to outsourced chief investment officer.
Do you have more experience with this? So the sub-advisor role is at the firms where I've worked with, that's where my experience is going to come from, was treated as if it was not, as if the player was not a sub-advisor. We had internal counsel. We didn't outsource it at the firms I worked for, and their advice was the safest way to approach the relationship was to treat as if they were internal, and that they, obviously, as Greg said earlier, we're here for the clients, so the fiduciary duty doesn't change. And I don't have a lot to add besides the guidance I always received was the fiduciary duty doesn't change, and every decision has to be made with that in mind.
But from a very practical point of view, that means that outside chief investment officer is now an access person to the firm.
Oh, true. They're not. Yeah, that individual's not going to have access to the same as an insider would to everything that's happening within the firm. My experience is from within the firm, working with that sub-advisor, making sure that the client's interest always came first.
So let's shift gears for a moment and let's focus on trading.
Right.
Obviously an essential function can make or break the profitability of an investment strategy. And I know, Dave, you have pioneered taking trading outside. So
right.
Tell us a little bit about, how you assess client needs and what you do after the fact once you've been engaged to provide an outsourced trading function.
Right. So before I get started, just why am I talking about this? It's all I've ever done. My experience is all with running trading desks and executing trades for small and some of the largest managers in the world. And the world is moving toward outsourcing of trading becoming much more common for a number of reasons, and I believe a lot of it has to do with the current trading environment. So when you look at the current trading environment, the large firms, Wall Street has in many ways abandoned the way they used to cover accounts, the way they used to approach both the execution of the funds trades and the value-add services and information flow. And there's a performance cost to the funds from that. So, just trying to get at why outsourced trading is becoming more common, and it revolves around that performance cost. So how do you get there and how do we analyze that? We can look at what's currently happening with your trades almost all trades are executed from your funds with large broker-dealers or you're directly with your prime broker or custodian. It's been widely reported that 95% or so of traders at these firms now have less than 5 years of experience. And this is getting to Wall Street, basically. This is not their profit center anymore. It used to be a real area of profit, trading, coverage of accounts, and really is not anymore. The trading has become a very robotic type of trading with algorithms, something we refer to as broker internalization, where a lot of the trades that come into brokers are just crossed internally, and high-frequency trading, which has basically bought their access into the world of Wall Street. And what this has created is the fact that the broker interest is much more now the profit they can achieve from a legal point of view, legally, from the trading flow and the trading volumes, and not your alpha preservation. It's they're not investing capital in covering accounts. They're investing capital in figuring out how to look at the flow of trades and make money from those trades while still getting best execution. And I'll talk more about the best execution in a little while. But brokers and high-frequency traders have started to dominate the market and profiting from the trades, and that can only come from the expense of the fund manager.
Well, hold on a second. Does that mean that we need to, stop fighting them and join them? I mean, if in fact the tide is high-frequency trading and or algorithmic trading, how does the small active manager compete? The small active manager needs to focus on their alpha and find a way that they can do this. And I don't know if people are looking at slides, but when I talk about the outsourced trading solution, there's a slide called Benefits of Outsourced Trading, and basically by outsourcing your trading, first, no, you don't just join them. What has happened over the last 10 years is there's been a joining of Wall Street in this. That's why algorithms and high-frequency trading and broker internalization has proliferated. But by outsourcing one's trading, the manager first gets to focus on portfolio management and asset gathering. You can then reduce the performance costs of poor trading because an outsourced trading firm is able to provide a very tailored approach to your fund's trading. So a true outsourced trading firm is going to start by learning the fund's investment process. A typical broker-dealer, prime broker, custodian is never going to understand or know anything about your investment process. From understanding that investment process, the fund manager and the traders at the outsourced trading firm can get together and truly discuss the trading needs of the fund, achieving best execution, tailoring that, and making sure best X is actually achieved, that the trade's not just executed within the NBBO, which some firms, that's all they care about, and the value-added flow of information between the trader and the fund manager. So, no, it's not just let's go along with what Wall Street is doing, and it's not necessarily a battle either. You don't have to fight it. Outsourced trading firms are available, and outsourced trading firms almost always will provide a higher level of experience on the trading side, a higher level of value add to you personally, the investment manager, because the trader is going to understand your investment process. So Dave, I want to take you back a few slides to the one that says from the buttonwood tree to 15 exchanges and 38-plus dark pools.
Yep.
Okay. I need you to demystify this for our listeners. What is a dark pool? How does it work? It sounds nefarious. Is it?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be.
Well, that's not a ringing endorsement.
To professional traders, dark pools are very valuable. They're a very valuable resource to benefit the fund manager. Dark pools can be utilized just to hide. So basically the terminology comes from, historically, from not with the buttonwood tree, but after the buttonwood tree, when most trades were traded on the New York Stock Exchange and other actual physical exchanges, those are called lit markets. Basically, an order goes into that market, and you can see what's bid for and what's offered, and you can see it up and down the book. So it's not just the best bid and offer, but you can see up and down the bids and offers what's there, how much volume, and what's being bid for. In dark pools, none of that is available to be seen.
So how do they transact the price?
They're typically, and I don't know that this is exclusively, but typically the buyers and sellers meet each other within a dark pool, and the trade executes at the midpoint, it's called. So typically most stocks now, liquid stocks, are trading a 1 penny spread. If it's $20.01 bid, $20.02 offer, that trade, when the buyer and seller show up, they're going to trade at 20.015 right in the middle. And it's a fantastic thing in a lot of ways, because once again, a lot of managers start by proving best X, and broker-dealers, I should say, start by proving best X because it's mandated because of Reg NMS and Reg ATS, the way these work, that trades execute within NBBO, the National Best Bid and Offer.
So is the dark pool price comparable to what they would get on an exchange?
It can be.
There's no direct correlation, though.
There's not a direct Well, there's a correlation because the dark pool price is based on the lit market, or the exchange's national best bid and offer.
Okay.
So there is a correlation. They're tied to each other.
But the dark pool price will not drive or move the lit price, will it?
It does not directly drive or move the lit price, but it absolutely indirectly drives it. And that's because of what we call information leakage. So a big part of a professional trader's job is to execute in a manner so that trade is not sniffed out or can't be seen even though it's dark. And that's difficult to do. That's one reason why outsourced trading firms are becoming more common, because they're attracting the better traders.
So how does an outsourced firm gain access to the dark pools? I mean,
well,
is it, you walk up to the speakeasy and say, Joe sent me? I mean,
no, you have to go through the approval process.
Okay. So there is a dungeon master here that's managing the dark pool.
It's highly regulated.
Okay.
As you would know, very highly regulated, and a broker dealer, a buy side client or an investment manager can't access a dark pool without the use of a broker, typically without a broker-dealer. Now, a lot of times this has become a turnkey operation where a buy-side can have access, but through the regulations of broker-dealers, and they're called ATS, Alternative Trading Systems is the other word for a dark pool, there is a dungeon master. Not just anyone can trade in a dark pool. That said, there are many with access to the dark pools that are in there only to gather information and then execute trades, and that's where there's information leakage. There's a lot. It's not difficult to, traders call watch the tape, and you can watch the dark pool tape once you're in a dark pool and use that information to profit from trades. That's one of the introductory statements I made with broker internalization, with high-frequency traders. High-frequency trading firms a few years ago were spending over $1 billion a year to get access to alternative trading systems, exchanges, broker-dealers, information flow, to profit from that information flow.
So is there an arbitrage opportunity between the price that you could get on a dark pool versus at ATS versus what you would get on the national market system?
Loosely stated arbitrage, yes. There may not be a completely 100% risk-free arbitrage, because in milliseconds, markets can move.
Right.
So, but yes, the high-frequency trading firms and other traders at proprietary traders at broker-dealers and others who are able to legally make money from this trading volume are doing just that.
So an investment fund has a position in a publicly traded stock, pick a name, and it's enormous, and it wants to trim the position, move it. If it goes to the normal markets, a sale of that magnitude would move the price.
Right. I mean, nowadays the markets are very, very thin. There's not a lot of liquidity in the lit markets. Typically there's 100 or 1,000 shares bid for or offered, but you may have easily 100,000, if not millions of shares in an order, and that, even in a very liquid stock like Microsoft, if somebody goes and starts taking offers, 100,000 shares at a time, the stock is going to move. And
but if I do it through an ATS, through a dark pool? will I have the same movement? Or
well, I believe you would have the same movement just because of the information leakage. It's not truly. It's hidden in the fact that the securities information processor, which is what the exchanges use to consolidate all quotes from all different exchanges and ATS and anything that is lit, going to be in the lit markets. That securities information processor is going to show everything that's lit. The dark doesn't show up there, but when the dark pool interacts with the market, there's information that the algorithms are programmed to pick up on and then move markets. So it's very common. It's a very simple thing to program for when a dark pool interacts with the market and there's a 5,000 share print at the midpoint, to be able to recognize if that's most likely a buyer or seller, and then move the markets. I have an example on one of the slides of what we call phantom liquidity, and basically what happens on this slide is in this stock, the market was incredibly quiet for 2 seconds, and 2 seconds is an eternity for electronic trading. The market was quiet. There's almost nothing happening to the bids or the offers. An order comes in to buy 20,000 shares, and there was 24,800 shares offered at the time. In the next 2 milliseconds, half of the offered stock canceled. That's 0.02 of a second. The quotes were very quiet beforehand. 80 quotes started coming in per 1,000th of a second, and that order to buy 20,000 only ended up buying 12,133 shares, and that was all in 2 milliseconds. This is the ability to cancel that quickly is in part what has happened because of I'm not really high frequency trading, broker dealers, just the current trading environment. For example, I mentioned securities information processors before. That's how quotes get consolidated. You can get a 25 millisecond advantage. You can create your own private securities information processor if you do what's called co-locating. I won't get too much into the weeds, but co-locate your servers at the exchanges. You can easily pay a lot of money to do that, and you will actually get all the fresh bids and offers 25 milliseconds potentially before the actual exchange publishes the quote. Nothing's going to change that 25 milliseconds except for what the high-frequency trader or whoever's purchased that information wants to do. So that's why things can disappear, and that's why, outsourced trading, to get back to, once again, outsourced trading can help with this because of the expertise.
So again, let's go up to the 30,000-foot level. What does it mean when the phantom liquidity cancels in 2 milliseconds? What's the impact on the price? What's the impact on the fund? What's the impact on the trader?
Great question. The direct impact here was only roughly 60% of the order ended up executing, but all of the information went out there. This was a buy order. Anyone who was selling stock and canceled their offers to sell, what they actually were doing here, most likely, they canceled their order to sell, and they started buying stock. The stock's going to move up in this case. The whole market, anyone who's watching this, who's programmed their systems, knows that there's 8,000 more shares that didn't execute, and there's now nothing offered. So even if the high-frequency trading firms are trading 100 shares, 200 shares at a time, which is oftentimes what they're doing, and they're doing it many, many, many thousands of times a day, they're buying it and then selling it a penny higher.
So I guess what I'm not understanding is when the order to buy 20,000 comes in, when there's 24,000 offered to sell, why doesn't that just get absorbed instantly?
In part because of, that's why I mentioned the securities information processor. There can be a difference of 25 milliseconds between the firms that have paid to co-locate their servers within the exchange. They're getting that information that a buy order of 20,000 came in, and they know what's offered. Those firms, if they're offering stock, have 24 milliseconds to cancel their offer before that's actually going to end up executing. And they do cancel, and oftentimes they're able to buy ahead of that order and profit. And all they have to do is profit by a half a cent or a penny.
Oh, sure. I mean, every millisecond, that's a lot of money. Those milliseconds add up, right?
There's, I won't get into it too much, but there's another slide it's called 10 milliseconds of Merck quotes. This slide, you can actually, if you've enabled your presentation, it can be an active slide. You click the play button, and it takes 1 minute and 3 seconds for this video to run. In that 1 minute and 3 seconds, it will show you all the different quotes from these 12 different exchanges, or 11 exchanges hitting the SIP in 10 milliseconds. So it takes over a minute to show you 10 milliseconds of quotes, and there are hundreds of thousands of streaming lights you'll see in the video, hundreds of thousands of quotes changing and bids and offers in there in that 10 milliseconds.
Okay, so now we understand the landscape. We understand that it is heavily regulated, and the nefarious name notwithstanding, it's still, something that the regulators have embraced. So how does an outsourced trading firm provide an edge?
So there are two different edges here. Right now we're talking about performance of trades. The edge with the performance of trades is, one, getting traders that are highly experienced. As I referenced before, a lot of this automated trading coincides with the fact that most of broker-dealers, prime brokers, and custodians are not paying traders to sit there and trade anymore. They're paying traders to make sure that the trades are getting into the algorithms and trading. Outsourced trading firms are paying professional traders. So you're able to get traders that hopefully are learning your investment process, have a much higher level of experience than you would get by just somebody entering trades into an algo. While outsourced traders may use algorithms, we're also able to customize the performance of those algorithms. We at my firm, we don't just use any canned generic algorithm without investigating how it works first and making sure it's performing the way we would want it to perform. And if it's not, we can customize very simply who we're interacting with. And then, very, very importantly, most broker-dealers, the traditional method of trading now, not using an outsourced trading firm, over 50% of the flow that goes into a broker-dealer trades internally at that broker-dealer. That's the typical statistic on a daily basis.
So they're clearing against their own book.
They're clearing against their own book, and an outsourced trading firm that does not have that own book to clear against, it doesn't have proprietary trading or market-making capabilities, is truly incentivized to do only one thing, best execution of the trade for the manager, which means all venues, all trading, we're able to go out and find the actual best way and best manner and best venue to trade the security. That's probably the most important part of outsourced trading. We're not conflicted. It's conflict-free. Best execution should be the only goal of an outsourced trading firm, and that's a huge advantage over just a straight broker-dealer.
So what's the ticket to the dance? What's the regulatory requirement for an outsourced trading firm?
To become an outsourced trading firm, you have to become a broker-dealer. So outsourced trading firms are registered broker-dealers. It's a very difficult process, long, difficult process, very demanding regulators in FINRA. And then to do it well, you have to have...
Well, and I would disagree with that. I don't think necessarily the FINRA new member process is as onerous as a lot of people make it out to be. It does take time.
You're correct.
And they will do the proverbial proctological exam, and so you have to be prepared for that. But, once you've been through the process, it is not that bad.
That's correct. And after having gone through the process, I would agree. I would agree completely.
Like your annual colonoscopy, right?
Yeah, I would agree completely, though. It's very doable. You just have to have all your ducks in a row. And you have to, I say this all the time, you have to take that regulatory process very seriously. I'm a trader. All I've done is run trading desks and trade up until now. Now I'm also Chief Compliance Officer of my firm. And that supervisory manual, compliance manual you're talking about, the pages are worn.
Yep. I'm
reading it all the time because we're only in business if we do that properly.
Correct.
But you're right. It's not an onerous process to get through that. It's just I can see why you are so valuable.
Well, look, there are a lot of firms out there that make a lot of money doing what we're talking about here. Nice. And they do it well, and they do it legally, and they do it within the compliance four corners. So it is somewhat of an education, head shrinking type process, right, where you have to learn, okay, I live within these guardrails, and as long as I live, my sort of coined phrase is embrace regulation. If you fight regulation, it's going to be a very onerous process. But if you embrace it, it works a lot easier. Thank you very much, Dave. We're going to shift gears here. We're going to talk with our other guest, excuse me, Tim Frazier. Tim and I go way back. He has been a guest at our programs in the past, and he and I got reacquainted recently in Chicago at a conference. And he caught my attention when he said that he's the largest employer in the city of New York. So you have to fill in what we're talking about there.
All right. Largest private employer in the city of New York. I want to make sure I'm clear. So good afternoon, everyone. And Dave, thanks for speaking. So this is a bit of a change of gears. We're going to talk about human resources, talk about kind of some of the components that go into it. And this isn't a commercial for my company. This is really more to leave everyone with some good nuggets on what's called the PEO industry. It's called professional. A PEO stands for a professional employer organization. And when Greg said TriNet is the largest private employer in New York City, we have about 75,000 worksite employees on our platform alone in New York City. And what does that mean? So those 75,000 worksite employees are working with client companies of TriNet. So it's well over 2,000, 3,000 client companies of TriNet that those worksite employees work for. So a PEO is essentially enters into an agreement with a company called co-employment. Bless you. It's called co-employment, and that's really where the PEO has the legal skin in the game to keep the company out of trouble from HR compliance issues, making sure that payroll taxes are remitted properly, making sure that workers' comp isn't going to put anyone out of business, because that could actually happen. And also because of that relationship, because you are working with that PEO and on their platform through co-employment, that gets you a benefit of economies of scale. If we talk about the greatest dark pool out there, it would probably be, I think we can all agree, it's the health insurance market in the United States for small businesses. It is way different than anywhere else in the world and how it operates. And so a PEO is really good for companies that are anywhere from one person all the way up to a couple of hundred. And there's different reasons why different companies use a PEO. So that's just a quick introduction. TriNet itself, we kind of go way back in the PEO industry days. It's an industry that's about 40 years old. TriNet traces its roots to about 35 years ago. TriNet acquired a company called Ambrose about 5 years ago. Ambrose was a PEO in New York and basically only worked with hedge funds, private equity firms, and the like. And so just our company overall, we have about 1,200 plus hedge fund clients, about 1,000 RIAs, 500 plus PE firms, 100 plus family offices, and so that makes about 37,000 financial services company employees that are actually on our platform across the country. So a little bit about TriNet and just an introduction. So just kind of as we're going to walk through some of these slides, just when you look at like human resources as a company and you look at the line items of expenses and everything, your biggest expense really is your people that work for you, right? Cybersecurity is expensive, legal is expensive, all that stuff is very, very expensive, but the people that work for you is a very big expense, right? So the overhead of salaries, but also just the liability that they bring to your company. So a PEO can really help a lot with that.
So, most firms, including law firm partnerships, use a payroll service, right? And, even though my payroll is for a partner in a law firm, and I get a K-1 as opposed to W-2, we still get our direct deposit processed by a payroll firm. Mm-hmm. So you do that, right?
Yes. So PEOs do three things. We're your HR provider. I'll get into more of that. We provide the payroll, so it is through the PEO that the payroll is done through the PEO because it's done on the PEO's tax ID. That's how we're able to get you the economies of scale on all of the health insurance and all those benefits. And then as far as that, and then we also do the benefits.
So employees then will get a W-2 from this firm because it's your tax ID as opposed to from, the firm that they hang their hat every day.
Right. But within that co-employment or agreement, there are If you're looking to get a loan or get an apartment in New York City and you have to go through all that documentation process, you don't work for TriNet, you work for your company. That's who's on your business card, that's what you do, and we have all the verification that's needed and all that documentation. So.
Okay. So let's talk about benefits. I mean, one of the big issues with the Affordable Care Act, and a lot of people don't realize this, it was an attempt by the prior administration to start to break the link between health insurance and employment. And, of course, we know that that didn't go too well. And so now the question is, we're back to health insurance being based and tied to employment.
Correct. And the fact is that the majority of Americans get their health insurance through their employer, right? But there's a small group market and a large group market, and it operates a little bit differently in different states. In New York, that large group is now considered 100 plus. In New Jersey, it's 50 plus. So that kind of causes some issues with companies if they're headquartered in New York and they have employees in New Jersey, or if they're in Connecticut or other states. Why does it cause problems? Because even if you have 70 people in your New York City, you're not going to get the access of the better benefit plans that are available to you. You're not going to have that access. Most companies might have access to one or two plans, and it seems like they get worse every single year, right? It seems like you pay more money and you get less for it, and it's more of a hassle, right? So a PEO and the economies of scale and that buying power that we can bring really is impactful there for those small businesses. So it basically takes those small businesses, immediately puts them in the large group market. So that gives them buying power. With TriNet, it's like 330,000 plus people. With ADP, it might be 340,000, 350,000 plus people. So you get a lot of buying power with the benefits. What you should expect from that is access to better plans that give you access to not just really good in-network benefits, but also access to doctors that don't take any sort of insurance, like all of them on Park Avenue. If you go to a knee specialist or something, they don't take insurance. So you want to get reimbursed. If you want to go see those specialists, you want to get reimbursed. So a PEO will provide you those large group access to the plans. And they're supposed to be cheaper. Just in terms of some stories of clients that we've worked with, we can go through the different benefits that are part of a PEO, right? We don't just provide medical, we provide dental, we provide vision, long-term, short-term disability, 401k, commuter benefits, all of that stuff, right? But health insurance is the one that I think is it's a big political issue, and it's near and dear to all of our hearts, right? Because it's what happens if I leave my company and I don't have health insurance, right? People stay at companies because of health insurance. So it's a big component of what we do. With that said, just give you some examples. Recently, small 3-person hedge fund, net our fee, we were able to save them $10,000. Okay, $10,000 for 3 people, that's not that much. But it is when you look at now they don't have a deductible to go to the doctor. So that when someone's going to the doctor with their family and their kid has to go to urgent care, there's not so much money out of their pocket. So that's what a large group plan and the quality of those plans can do for people. The 15-person company, a hedge fund, we saved them about $70,000, and that was not our fee. So these are real numbers of what we've done. And right now, working on a 56-person fund here in the city that's going to come on board with us in January, and we're saving them just over $200,000. And so there's real dollars. That's an actual FTE. We're not going to come in and replace staff or anything, but those are real savings that go to the bottom line.
What about retirement plans or ESOPs? Do you do any administration with those? Because stay tuned for the session in December when we talk about exit strategies. One of the things we will talk about is leveraged buyouts and the use of certain employee stock ownership structures as a means to transition to the next generation. But what about normal retirement plans, 401ks, et cetera? How does that dovetail when you have a dual employment relationship like we're talking about?
It isn't an issue. The benefit of having a PEO come in and do that is they are the third-party administrator. We are the fiduciary, so we will help you with all of the form filings and all of the compliance testing. I don't think I have very much info on the slides on our 401k, but it is within any sort of PEO, you should get access to your 40 fund lineup of different mutual funds, American funds, Vanguard, so on and so forth. So that is part of it. It doesn't, because of the co-employment relationship, it doesn't affect someone being able to use this 401k. If anything, a PEO will help you in administering that and making sure that it's streamlined, that it runs through payroll. With an ESOP, most PEOs, I think pretty much all of them, will not administer the ESOP component, But through the payroll, the PEO will work with you to make those deductions, contributions accordingly.
Yeah. So let's talk about the profile. You mentioned a 3-person hedge fund or a 1-person hedge fund. What if I'm a 50-person firm? I've got 30 analysts, 3 portfolio managers, and the rest of the people are sales and distribution. My salespeople get some form of incentive based upon assets under management that they bring in. They're also associated with a broker-dealer because there's 12B1 fees and blah, 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 blah. Do you administer that? PEOs administer that entire package of compensation arrangements?
So we'll do the entire package of compensation arrangements. Outside of W-2 wages and K-1 partner distributions, we won't do kind of more high-level kind of figuring of compensation, but if when we're given that information to put into our system, we can run through payroll.
Equity plans,
correct.
83Bs, all that stuff?
Yes. So when we work closely with our clients, a company of 50 people, we'll work closely with their chief compliance officer, CFO, to just make sure we have the right distributions and contributions from employees' payroll and everything. So that's correct.
So we have about 3 minutes left, and anything for the good of the order, that you're seeing coming down the pike in the HR outsourced claims, any exposures, anything that our clients should worry about?
So there's more and more HR and employment law regulations that come up and laws, and you just have to stay on top of that. In New York City, there's family paid medical leave. There's if you're over 15 people, you have to have in-person sexual harassment training in New York. So things like that you have to stay on top of. If you don't, you're going to have to face some, at least penalties. But you just want to, in operating your business, when you think of HR laws and all those things that are happening, it really comes down to kind of what you talked about, the tone from the top. Right? What is that executive level leadership doing? How are you developing that culture? You care about your employees, and if you do, what infrastructure are you giving them? So abiding by the right laws, making sure that you take sexual harassment claims seriously, making sure that people don't laugh about the online training, that you actually take a moment and kind of make that, again, top-down approach within the culture. Very important. So be on the loop of those types of different changes. They're always happening. New York, California are the best, right, in terms of those. And the last thing I would say is when you look at kind of like looking at PEOs, pricing should be a flat per employee per month fee, and that's basically it, minus a setup fee. You don't want to pay a percentage of payroll because if you're paying and you're working in financial services and you're paying more people and hopefully everyone's getting bonuses, you don't want to pay more money to the insurance company or to a PEO for that. So.
Now, obviously, success breeds success, but you don't necessarily want to share that with your service provider.
Exactly. Yeah, well, yes, 100%.
So, a few moments. Dave, I see you taking notes there feverishly. Is there anything that you want to add to the discussion on outsourcing and services trading?
I just, from the trading point of view, it really comes down to 2 things. There's no expense to a fund to outsource their trading. They don't have to hire in-house traders. They don't have the infrastructure build. And then the second is the performance of the fund. They're both very important. There's no expense for hiring an outsourced trading firm. You don't hire traders. That's all borne from the outsourced trading firm, and you can improve the fund's performance by getting higher quality executions.
And, of course, using an outsourced HR firm, you get the benefits of economies of scale, broader purchasing power.
And you give time to the important leaders of your company to focus on generating alpha and growing the business versus having to deal with stuff that they don't want to do and that they're not particularly, perfectly experienced at.
Now, in both cases, again, the lawyers have to have the last word here. Keep in mind that when you outsource any of these functions, that doesn't relieve the firm and its management of their personal responsibility to do the right thing and to make sure to police their service providers and make sure that the job that they're doing is consistent with the rules and requirements. That sort of is the ticket to the dance. You assume that when you hire a service provider that they are up to speed, but nevertheless, you still need to double check. One of the areas we didn't touch on where we see a lot of attempts to outsource is AML and KYC compliance. And normally that is done with an administrator, or in the case of separately managed accounts where the custodians are involved, they do that. There was a proposal floated a few years ago, Ausra, you worked on that with me, analyzing it, where they were going to make investment advisors and asset management firms and funds primary AML KYC reporters. But we haven't seen the light of day of that proposal since it was originally issued.
Correct.
So we're still in a secondary role. That doesn't mean that the funds don't need to have KYC and AML procedures, and advisors that need to do that. Brokers are frontline reporters on KYC and AML, so they don't have that luxury. But what we always tell our clients there is you have to be prudent. And just because you're not a frontline reporter doesn't mean that you should, willy-nilly ignore red flags or not file SARs if it seems appropriate to do so. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to our speakers in our program today. I hope you've learned a few things about outsourcing, the legal constraints, and the benefits to be derived. Until next time, have a great day. This is Greg Nowak at Pepper Hamilton. Thank you.